Her phone's screen glowed brighter than the streetlights outside, and for a moment, Jenna thought she might have left it on overnight. The calendar app lay open, the white background washed in the blue of late evening light filtering through the blinds, and there it was. Arrival. Tonight. She frowned, her thumb hovering over the screen. She didn't remember adding it. Her phone had been in her bag all day, tucked into the bottom of her coat while she walked home, past empty storefronts and cracked sidewalks. The city smelled faintly of rain on asphalt and distant garbage. Nothing seemed unusual, and yet the words on her screen throbbed in a way that made her stomach tighten. Her hand shook slightly as she tried to tap the event, to delete it. The interface stuttered. The event now had a location, her apartment. Not just any time. Tonight. Jenna set the phone on the kitchen counter, just out of reach of the dim overhead light, which flickered intermittently. The hum of the refrigerator was low, almost imperceptible, but it seemed too steady, too measured. She leaned against the counter and tried to breathe. Maybe it was a glitch, a mis-synced calendar from work or a wrong entry she had accidentally typed days ago. She poured herself a glass of water. The ice clicked against the glass louder than she expected, each sound reverberating in the apartment like a small alarm. When she returned to the phone, the event had changed. The time was now earlier, a few minutes from the moment she had last checked. Her pulse rose. She picked up the device again, checking other apps. Her messages were normal, notifications blank, yet something about the interface felt off. Even the lock screen seemed too crisp, too reflective, as though the phone itself had sharpened in the low light. A soft chime sounded. Her phone had no sound notifications set, but when she looked down, nothing new had appeared. Only the calendar. Arrival. Tonight. Jenna moved toward the living room window. The street below was empty, the shadows of distant trees stretching thin across the cracked sidewalk. She tried to rationalize the event. Perhaps it was a reminder she set during a half-conscious state, maybe she had marked something weeks ago and forgotten. But the title, Arrival, resonated with a memory she hadn't revisited in years. Her grandmother. She had spoken once of a guest, a visitor who arrived without announcement, someone who knows your house before you do, she had said. Jenna had laughed it off, a child's nervous fascination with ghost stories. Now, alone in her apartment, she felt the words scrape along her skin like cold paper. She turned back to the phone. The event had multiplied. Now there were 3 identical entries, staggered a few minutes apart. All labeled. Arrival. Tonight. Each one timestamped slightly before the last, as if counting down. The air in her apartment grew thick. The quiet hummed. The ticking of the wall clock felt alien, slightly faster than it should. She tried calling a friend, anyone, but the dial tone rang and rang, smooth and unbroken. No voicemail. No answer. Nothing. Jenna moved to her bedroom, phone in hand, her reflection stretching long in the hall mirror. The calendar events were now accompanied by a reminder. Silent, vibrating once in her pocket, just enough to startle, then nothing. Her eyes flicked to the timestamp. It had changed again. Now it read 10 minutes from now. She sank onto the bed, pulling the blankets tight around her. The apartment felt wrong. She could hear it. The faint scuff of shoes in the hallway outside, or maybe it was her own nerves playing tricks. The window rattled as a gust of wind pushed against it, but the sound was low, deliberate. She tapped on the event again. This time, the screen displayed a note, a single sentence in tiny gray text beneath the title. You invited it. Jenna's stomach turned. She didn't remember doing so. She hadn't invited anything. And yet, somewhere deep in her memory, a fragment of the past flickered, an old photograph, a game played as a teenager, a ritual read about in a journal she had long forgotten. A dare from a friend. Try it. Just say the words. Nothing will happen. The words had been whispered in the dark of a basement, a reckless thrill. Something she had laughed off, then tucked away. The lights flickered again. Jenna's phone vibrated on the bed. The reminders had no sound, but the pulses were rhythmic, each one echoing the faint heartbeat she could feel in her chest. Arrival. Tonight. Arrival. Tonight. She wanted to leave, to run, but the apartment seemed smaller now, walls pressing inward, shadows pooling unnaturally in corners. The elevator in her building had been broken for days. The stairs would take her down into empty corridors, cold and narrow. Outside, the street remained unnervingly silent. Another notification. The timestamp had moved again. Now it was within 5 minutes. Jenna's hands shook as she typed a search into her phone. Arrival event calendar glitch. Nothing useful appeared. Only forums filled with others who described glitches, duplicate events, timestamps shifting, phantom notifications. But the stories were empty of resolution, ending in unresolved fear. She felt it then. A presence. Not someone she could see, not yet, but an awareness, a weight pressing lightly against her back. Something patient. Something that had been waiting. The last few minutes crawled. The digital clock on the wall ticked inhumanly, seconds stretching, the numbers crawling across the face like crawling insects. Her phone vibrated again. This time, the note had changed. Do not hide. I know where you are. Jenna bolted upright. Her apartment was dark now, the overhead lights dead, the only illumination coming from her phone. The street beyond the window remained empty, yet the shadows seemed thicker, deeper. She could feel movement, just beyond her vision, subtle, deliberate. A breeze passed over her neck, and she swore she heard a soft whisper, her name, carried in the fabric of the room. The calendar app updated again. Every minute now brought a new line of text beneath the event. Almost here. You cannot delay. I am inside. Jenna dropped the phone and ran to the door. It swung open with a gentle push, a soft exhalation of air against her hand. The hallway stretched endlessly, dimly lit by emergency lights. The sound of her own footsteps was loud, echoing too long, overlapping, repeating. She paused, listening. The faint scuff of shoes again. Closer this time. A single event notification lit up her phone, sitting silently on the floor. Arrival, now. Jenna froze. The air was cold, unnatural. Her breath left thin, visible lines in the faint light. The shadows shifted in patterns too precise, almost geometric. She could hear it then. The softest scratching at her doorframe, deliberate, patient. She turned back to the phone. The event note had one last line. Remember me. It clicked. A memory of her grandmother. A ritual. Words spoken, forgotten. A summoning, childish and reckless, that she had laughed away at the time. The thing was here because she had called it. And now, it was patient, watching, savoring the final moments before manifestation. The lights flickered one last time. In the brief illumination, she saw the hallway behind the door. Something moved, but not like a person. Its form was wrong, elongated, subtly warped, as though it existed half outside her dimension. The shape waited at the threshold, perfectly still. The scuffing had stopped. Silence pressed against her eardrums. Jenna's phone vibrated violently, its screen now dark except for the calendar icon pulsing like a heartbeat. Her hands were frozen over it. The shadows seemed to curl toward her, the room tilting ever so slightly. She screamed, but no sound came. The form in the hallway remained, patient. Watching. Waiting. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, everything stopped. The phone lay dead, the lights flickered back to normal, and the hallway was empty. Her pulse thundered in her ears. No scuffing. No movement. The apartment smelled faintly of ozone and rain. Jenna sank to the floor, trembling. She picked up the phone. The calendar app had reset itself. The event was gone. No reminders. No timestamps. Nothing. But when she opened the gallery to check her photos, there was one new image. It was of her bedroom, taken from the exact spot where she had been sitting. She was alone, or so it seemed at first. But behind her, in the soft edge of the frame, a dark shape lingered in the corner, half-formed, patient, still, with a presence that pressed against the lens, and against her memory. She dropped the phone. The image lingered in her mind, the last line of an unfinished sentence she could not remember writing. I will return. Jenna did not sleep that night. She could not. And when dawn came, the shadows of her apartment seemed thicker than the light, and the air carried a quiet, measured weight, as if her apartment was no longer entirely hers. The calendar would update again, she knew. It always did. The bathroom was warm, humid, and quiet, the kind of quiet that made the hiss of running water feel too loud. Jacob had finished his shower and stepped onto the cold tile, his bare feet sending small shivers up his legs. He reached for the towel, the fabric rough against his skin, and dried himself slowly, feeling the steam curl around him like a living thing. He leaned over the sink to brush his teeth, the toothbrush vibrating in his mouth, and caught sight of his reflection in the fogged-up mirror. At first, it was ordinary, a streaky haze formed by the heat and moisture of the room. But then the condensation began to shift, unnaturally, forming shapes that made Jacob freeze. 30. He blinked, and his heart gave a small, sudden lurch. He had not written anything on the mirror. The numbers were neat, deliberate, carved into the fog as if someone, or something, had reached through the steam to inscribe them. 29. Jacob's hand trembled as he reached toward the glass. He tried to rationalize it. Condensation sometimes formed vague patterns. Maybe he'd imagined it, maybe he had brushed against the glass in some half-asleep stupor, but the numbers kept counting down, slow, deliberate, inevitable. He tried wiping the mirror with his sleeve. It only accelerated. 28, 27, 26. The mirror fogged back almost immediately, thicker this time, the numbers skipping ahead without warning. 24, 22, 21. A cold draft seemed to hiss under the door, but he knew the bathroom windows were closed. He pulled the towel tighter around his shoulders, the warm fabric failing to chase away the sudden chill creeping along his spine. His reflection began to distort subtly, the eyes slightly wider than they should be, the corners of his mouth stretched in a way that didn't match the mirror's real geometry. It was him, yet it wasn't. Jacob swallowed hard, trying to focus on the toothbrush in his hand. Perhaps he was tired. Perhaps the hot shower and late hour had frayed the edges of his mind. He rinsed the brush, turned on the faucet, and glanced back. The numbers were closer now. 15, 14, 13. He dropped the toothbrush. The clatter on the tile echoed harshly in the small room. Wiping the mirror again didn't stop it. In fact, the numbers jumped faster now, cascading down like grains of sand slipping through an invisible hourglass. 10, 9, 8. A strange thing happened. The reflection began showing details that weren't in the room. A photograph of him as a child, the one from the attic he hadn't looked at in years, appeared behind him in the mirror. He spun around. The wall was bare. The tiles were the same cold gray they had always been. But the mirror insisted otherwise. 7, 6. Jacob's breathing was shallow, quick, rasping. The warmth of the steam felt like a trap, pressing against his chest, humid and stifling. He reached for the doorknob, but the handle felt slippery, as if coated in condensation. The mirror pulsed subtly, the fog thickening, obscuring everything except the numbers. 5, 4. The numbers blurred. They wavered and then began forming words beneath them, phrases that made his stomach knot. Do you remember? Jacob's mind raced. That was from his own memory, the forgotten argument with his father, the lie he had told his best friend, the day he had broken the window with a baseball bat. The mirror knew. It had always known. He tried turning the light on and off, hoping to reset the reality in some banal, physical way, but the reflection ignored it. Even as the overhead bulb flickered and hissed, the numbers continued, skipping in fits now, faster, more urgent. 3, 2. The reflection's eyes, the ones that looked like his but weren't quite, shifted to watch him, to anticipate him. A faint outline began to emerge in the mirror behind the numbers, something dark and coiled, indistinct but undeniably present. Jacob backed away. The tile underfoot was icy now, not just cool, biting at his bare feet. His chest tightened. The countdown, the reflection, the steam, they all merged into a single, oppressive force, pressing in, folding the small room into something alien and hostile. He screamed, but his voice sounded hollow, delayed, echoing back from the mirror in a distorted rhythm. 1. The last digit lingered longer than it should. Then, instead of 0, the numbers reset in a strange, circular motion. 30. The fog swirled around the new sequence, carrying a new message beneath it. He could barely make it out. And it is free. The words sank into him like ice. This wasn't a timer counting down to something arriving. It was counting down to something being released. Something that had been waiting, patient, in the dark corners of his own home, in the spaces behind his reflection, in the quiet he had taken for granted. Jacob stumbled backward. The mirror shimmered, its surface rippling like water. He could see shapes now, faint and writhing behind the condensation, reflections that were never him. They pressed forward, mirrored hands reaching, mouths forming silent words. He wanted to look away, to cover his eyes, to break the spell, but he couldn't. The mirror pulsed again, the fog thickening until the room seemed to shrink, closing in. The reflection smiled. He didn't. And then he understood. It had been waiting for him to notice, to recognize the pattern, to acknowledge that the quiet, mundane nights, the showers, the brushing of teeth, they were the cage keeping it in check. But the countdown, the numbers, the personal memories, they were the key. The last number blinked, sharp, urgent, personal. 0. The bathroom went silent, heavier than before, but it was a silence full of promise. Behind the fog, something moved, something real. Something that had always been just beyond the reflection. Jacob never saw it step out. Not fully. Not yet. But in the mirror, he saw it smile. And in that smile, he knew the countdown had never been for him. It had been for it.